Data validation in Excel is a feature that automatically checks the data entered into a cell to see if it's allowed given restrictions set in advance. We can use data validation when we want to control or restrict data that's entered into a spreadsheet. Data validation is used very frequently, and a common example of this is when you are filling in forms online and some fields only accept certain entries. For example, you may have to select an option from a drop-down list or enter your date of birth in a specific format before being able to proceed with submitting the form. Similarly, when we are working in Excel, we may want to restrict cell values to certain formats. Let's learn how to use data validation to do this using our dessert list as an example. Suppose we want to restrict the values that can be entered into the ratings column. Let's select all the cells we want to restrict and then go to the Data ribbon and click on Data Validation, which is under Data Tools. In this menu, we will see all the options we can choose from to restrict input values. We have to tell Excel what type of values should be allowed to be input in the selected cells. So let's click on this arrow to see our options. We have the option of restricting input values to whole numbers, decimals, a list, dates, times, specific text lengths, or custom settings. So suppose we only want to be able to input the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in our desserts ratings column. Which option should we choose from this menu? Since the numbers 1 to 5 are whole numbers, we should select this from the drop-down. Next, we will be able to further specify how we want to restrict our whole numbers. This second drop-down gives us various options. We can set minimum and maximum values, or choose whether our whole numbers should be within a certain range. Since we only want people to enter whole numbers from 1 to 5 inclusive, let's select between as our second restriction setting. Now, depending on the restriction you apply here, these fields will change. Since we selected between, we have to specify a minimum and maximum value. In our case, these will be 1 and 5. Let's just review our validation criteria. We have told Excel to only allow whole numbers between 1 and 5 in our ratings column cells. Alright, that sounds good. So let's click OK and test this out. Let's click on cell E2, type in the number 5 and press Enter. That worked fine because the number 5 meets our validation criteria. In this next cell, let's type in the number 7 and then press Enter. Oops! Excel doesn't let us do this and prompts us with an error message. We can click Retry and then edit our cell value, or we can click Cancel, in which case Excel will delete the value we just entered into the cell. Let's retry and enter the number 3 instead. That worked. Okay, so now let's try entering a 0 into the cell below. And again we get the error message and can't proceed since 0 doesn't fall between the allowed range. Now an error message like this will pop up if we enter invalid data. And the great thing is that this can be customized. Let's just cancel this and highlight our cells and open the data validation menu again. Have a look at the top and you will see two other tabs, an input message tab and an error alert tab. The error alert tab allows us to customize the style and content of error messages that are displayed. If we want to display an error alert, this box up here must be ticked. We can then choose from a style from this menu. These three styles are not just how the alert is displayed, but define if Excel will still allow the user to proceed with invalid data. The stop style was what we just experienced. Excel will display an error alert if a restricted value is entered and will not allow users to proceed with entering such values. they will either have to change the value to an allowed value or delete the cell contents. Now the warning style is a bit different. As its name suggests, it will display a warning message if a value that is not allowed is input into a cell. The difference is that once the warning message is displayed, users have the option of changing the value or continuing with the restricted value. If we choose this third style, which is an information style alert, users will just be alerted that their value does not meet the requirements, but will not be forced to do anything about it. Let's try out the warning style error alert for our example. Now in these fields, we can enter a title and a message to customize our error alert. If we leave the message box blank, Excel will show a generic error message relating to the validation criteria we have chosen. Now before we try this out, let's have a look at the second tab. This tab allows us to create a title and message that is displayed whenever a user clicks on a cell with data validation settings applied to it. The input message acts like a prompt, telling users what values should be entered. You just have to make sure this box on top is ticked if you want it displayed. Let's go ahead and enter some directions right here to tell our users what to do. And let's not forget to give the message a title. And we're ready to test this out. Now, when you use data validation, it's very important to test it out to make sure that it's working correctly. Try entering both valid and invalid data into cells to make sure that the settings are working as you intended and that messages are displayed correctly. So now if we click on any of these cells, we should be able to see our input message. Great. But now if we don't follow these instructions and enter a 0 in this cell, we should see the warning alert we set. And there it is. But remember, unlike a stop alert, a warning alert like this allows us to continue with an invalid value if we wish.